This 2024 NFL Offensive Player of the Year Betting Awards edition of the NFL Propcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. You can win up to 325 times your entry with their new Pick 8. Sign up with promo code MACHINE to claim your special pick and first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Make sure that promo code MACHINE. And we're also brought to you by Rhythm. Build your own betting model using their AI betting engine. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. Welcome, everyone, to the Propcast, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Here to get into our next awards market for the upcoming NFL season. We're going to dive into the 2024 NFL Offensive Player of the Year award market for the upcoming year. Definitely excited to get into this one because I feel like there's definitely some conversation to be had in this specific awards market. But joining me here to help me break everything down for this awards market, I've got my guy here with me. It's ChrisBeCappin. Chris, what's going on, my man? How are you doing?
What's up? It's a beautiful day in on the East Coast here. It's hot as hell. But outside of that, everything is fine and lovely. I'm excited to get into Offensive Player of the Year with you on today's pod.
Definitely, yeah. This is the week where it's relatively a quiet week. I'll say that. I know you and I were talking offline that we'll see the WNBA be off for a month for the Olympics. MLB is on their All-Star break here, so they won't have games start until Friday. So a lot of people taking this time to really take advantage of taking a vacation, taking some days off, resetting the buttons, resetting the batteries, getting some energy to get ready for the NFL season and the rest of the MLB season and WNBA season as well. So I thought this would be a good time to get a little bit more content here for the NFL season upcoming up. But Chris and I, we've already done MVP. We did Coach of the Year, and I believe we also already did a Comeback Player of the Year as well. So we have 3 down. I think just Defensive and Offensive Player of the Year, and also Rookie of the Year for the offense and defense is left. So we'll get that done here the next couple weeks here before we ramp up our division previews for our season-long player prop bet. So definitely excited here. But Chris, let's just dive right into it here, my man. Offensive Player of the Year, I think you and I did the MVP. I think that was the first one that we did for the season, or the upcoming NFL season, I should say, for the awards market. And we had talked about it for that particular award, that it was really driven by quarterbacks, right? And there's no secret about that. And I think that when we talk about Offensive Player of the Year, I think it's a little bit more wide open, right? When we talk about other skill positions, whether it's running backs, whether it is wide receivers, or even quarterbacks have also won this award. But now I went back and looked at the past winners, and just this past season, right? We saw what Christian McCaffrey was able to do for the San Francisco 49ers. I know between myself, you, and Rod, we talked a lot about CMC and how dominant he was and how good of a player he was. I think good is an understatement for CMC for that San Francisco 49ers team. I mean, he was in conversation for MVP as well. But you take a look at some of the past winners, and I'll go back maybe about the last 8 years, or I'll go back the last 10 years to kind of round it up the top 10, or last 10 years, I should say. I'm sorry. So we've had 3 quarterbacks win this award. 2015, Cam Newton, 2016, Matt Ryan, and then 2018 was Patrick Mahomes. So 5 straight years now since the 2019 season, Chris, it's either been a running back or it's been a wide receiver. And I'll go through the list here in a minute here, but that was kind of my general thoughts, just off the top, pulling the curtain back here a little bit, looking at this award, that, hey, there's a little bit more not quarterback driven, I should say, for this type of award. And I'll talk about CMC, what he was able to do last season, 2,000 scrimmage yards last year. Definitely warranted, 21 touchdowns total for him to win this award last year. So I think this is more of a fun conversation here, Chris. I don't know what your thoughts on here for the Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. You took a lot of the words right out of my mouth. This one seems to be, like you said, a little bit more wide open, because we've seen some quarterbacks win it. I had 4 quarterbacks in the last 12 years. I know you looked at 10, but 4 in the
Yeah,
last
yeah,
12, 5 running backs, and then 3 wide receivers as well. And what was interesting with the wide receivers is that they've been more recent. So it
yep.
does kind of, the market is wide open. I mean, we probably could do this pod for, close to 3 hours going through all of the guys and the odds. And it's a little overwhelming at times, but I'm really excited to do it. Absolutely. Like I said, the first thing that stuck out to me was that and to that point, when I was looking through the odds, the first 18, the shortest 18 players as far as odds wise go were non-quarterbacks. I thought that
Yeah.
was extremely interesting. It made me think, okay, cool. I don't even want to look at too many quarterbacks for this award. Not that they can't win it, but I'm more looking towards the running backs and the wide receivers for sure. Just because, like I said, the top 18 were all either wide receivers or running backs.
Yeah, and exactly what you mentioned, right? Like this award now with the NFL has become more of a passing league, right? And we're starting to see wide receivers starting to not only rack up the yardage, but also touchdowns as well. And you and I think we talked about this last season as well, is that the running back position has also changed now, right? You have to be more of a type of a Christian McCaffrey, uh, Travis Etienne, I think, recognized that as well. I think he mentioned that last season, that you can't just be a downhill running back anymore. You have to be involved in the passing game, a versatile guy catching footballs out of the backfield. And I think that's what we're going to kind of see going forward. But like you mentioned, yeah, that's also another thing that I did notice when you were looking at the odds for this award, that it's not really a lot of quarterbacks that are involved, at least the shorter odds. When we talk about the odds on favorite, I think the one quarterback that is first on this list, it's at 45-1 in Josh Allen, right? We'll go through the list here in a minute. And I think that's where they're kind of bunched up, where the quarterbacks come in with Allen, Burrow, Lamar, Mahomes, Hurts, Anthony Richardson. So those quarterbacks are bunched up there. And then you talk about the odds on favorites, more running backs and wide receivers here. But Chris, before we do dive into the odds here, don't forget the Sports Gambling Podcast. It's getting you ready for college football with their conference preview. So make sure you guys check out the Sports Gambling Podcast with Sean, Ryan, and Colby, of course. And tune in wherever you do get your podcast or the SGPN app to get all the pods that happen across the network. All right, Chris. So what you mentioned there about the quarterbacks that are not the top 12 to 10 to 12 favorites, they were bunched up there. So I really honestly just crossed them off the list. And nothing really outside of 50-1 excited me. I know Raheem Mostert last season had a fantastic year for the Miami Dolphins, and one of his teammates is the odds-on favorite for this upcoming season, and Tyreek Hill at 7-1. But as far as anybody greater than 50-1, maybe in the 60, 70, 75, 100-1 range, did anybody excite you in that list there to kick off our to kick us off here to get through the betting odds here?
Now, like you said, it was the quarterbacks, and like you said, all of them kind of lumped in together. Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson. Yeah, none of those. I mean, you got Devontae down there. I saw him, 80-1. None of those guys really excited me too much, to want to take too much of a long shot here to kick things off either.
Yeah, it's honestly for Devontae. I mean, I saw his name there as well, just like you mentioned there, Chris. It's just a quarterback play, right? Like he does. It's what, I don't know who the starter is. Is it Gardner Minshew there that's there for the Raiders? And I'm not even sure how long Devontae Adams maybe is going to be there for the Raiders, honestly. But yeah, so outside of those longer odds, I mean, it's fun to talk about. The best odds right now is 80-1 for Devontae Adams. You can find that over at FanDuel. But outside that bigger list just really didn't excite me for some of these guys here. And again, I'm gonna be completely wrong. Somebody could obviously have a breakout season and just catapult themselves into that conversation for offensive player of the year here. But getting past that bunch of quarterbacks here, Chris, off the top here, I want to ask you, when you're looking at this award, what's kind of your thought process on what you're looking at for you to put money down on some of these guys? Because again, so we're kind of going through these award markets, and we have to keep in mind as well is that in the month of July going into August, that our money's going to be tied up to about the end of February, or sorry, right before the Super Bowl, where they announced the winners, that we got to find some real value here for some of these guys. But what's kind of your thought process when you're looking at these with this award at least?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. First off, when we do any of these future, markets, and we know our money's going to be tied up for, quite a while. A lot of things got to get taken into consideration. I think the first thing that stands out to me when I'm evaluating this specific market, if I'm a little bit more cautious, just because we know that this award can go to a quarterback that has an outstanding year, a running back that has a superior year as well. When we talk about CMC last year, or a wide receiver. So this one really holds me up just a tad bit, makes me not want to, dabble, too much and go too deep into, playing these markets and make too many bets. And it also makes me want to lighten up my unit size as well when I'm placing these, these wagers, because an injury for, even if it's a short 3-week injury, that could supersede you back, set you back, some votes towards an award like this when so many people are on the list. So the first thing that jumps out to me, is I think, I kind of mentioned it already. There has to be some kind of superior season that you have.
Right.
Even if we just go back to CMC last year, you mentioned it, but 15 rushing touchdowns, was 300 yards, more than Derrick Henry, who was second on the list, and almost 300 yards more than Derrick Henry, who was second on the list. Second most touchdowns by Raheem Mostert. So I'm looking for somebody that's going to be healthy. I'm looking for somebody that's going to be in a good system, and somebody that I think is going to be not only reliable, but the system that the offensive coordinators are putting the players in. I'm looking for them to target that player a lot, because you really have to separate yourself. I looked at CeeDee Lamb numbers last year.
Mm-hmm.
He led the league in receptions with 135. He had the second most yards, almost 1,800, right behind Tyreek Hill. And he still didn't win the award. And if I would have had money on CD, I would have been upset, So that's what I say when I say, limit, just the exposure that's out there, but also limit, how much I'm betting, because neither one of us predicted that type of year for CD. And if we would have bet on him to, do something like, take home this award, we would have been really, really frustrated about that. And the same thing could be said for Tyreek Hill as well. 119 catches last year. He was second. And he was 1 yard short of 1,800. So I'm looking for something that, is close to never been done before. And you mentioned at the top of the show, we talk about this all the time, that that it's becoming more of a passing league. And we saw Tyreek Hill say that he wanted to go out there and go for 2,000 yards, have a 2,000 yard catch season, 2,000 yard season. So I'm looking for something that is either never been done before. If I'm looking for a wide receiver, and I'm looking for something, if I'm looking at a running back, like you said, has to be dual threat in today's NFL. If I need you to be able to catch out the backfield, rack up the receptions, ball security, of course, is important because that's reliability from a coaching perspective. And I also need you to be able to put your head down and give me 5 yards to carry as well, and to be dependable at the goal line and be able to punch it in. And we saw CMC be able to do all of those things last year, So it's a very high level award. You have to have fill a stat sheet, because if you're not the MVP of the league, more than likely, if you have the stats, you could win this award. It's kind of like secondary too, and the criteria almost feels the same. If I wanted your thought process on that as well, do you kind of feel like this is like an MVP number 2 type award?
It almost feels that way, right? And I think that when we talked about when those quarterbacks won the awards, when we talked about Cam Newton, Matt Ryan, Patrick Mahomes, it was almost like they also had like an MVP caliber type of year. And I think for this type of award, you it's not that you have to think outside of the box, but it's exactly what you mentioned, is that someone to rack up the receptions, the yards, to stay healthy. They're also going to get the touchdowns. And also for running backs, like you talked about, right? Like it's that thing, CMC is like the model of what some of these other running backs have to do to be considered for this type of award. And I think number one, we could talk about this for any award market, right? It's always comes down to health. And some of these guys that are on the list, yeah, they've had their share of injuries, but also they have that ability to put up those yards, right? And I think that for when I'm looking at it, it's exactly what you mentioned there as well. So, I mean, last season's just a prime example, right? I mean, we saw the yardage that those two guys that you just mentioned were the wide receivers, Tyreek Hill. If he had maybe 2 more games where he had better receiving yards, this might be a different conversation where he had a 2,000-yard receiving year for the Miami Dolphins. CeeDee Lamb, I had him on my fantasy team last year. He was an absolute stud. You just mentioned the numbers there, Chris. And for those two guys, and again, I'm not taking anything away from CMC. I 100%, I think you and I both agree that CMC should have gotten the award, but it's going to take those type of numbers for guys to put up to be in the conversation for that award, let alone, win the award there. So, before we do get into the odds here of guys that are shorter than 40 to 45 to 1 here, let me remind everybody about our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Pick 8 is now live. You can create entries with up to 8 picks, and Underdog will automatically double flex your entry so you can miss up to 2 picks and still win your entry. With more picks to make and extra ways to win, the excitement is higher than ever. The best part, you can win up to 325x your original amount. And you can now use specials and boost on all flex entries. Don't miss your share and your chance to try it out before it is gone. So make sure you guys sign up with promo code MACHINE. Yes, I do have my own promo code now here for the Propcast to claim your special pick and first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Make sure you use my promo code MACHINE over at UnderdogFantasy.com. And hey, guys, Circa Sports is back with Circa Survivor and Circa Millions, giving away $16 million in guaranteed prizes. And of course, Circa contests have no rake. Circa Millions pick 5 NFL teams against the spread each week and compete for $6 million or survive the NFL gauntlet to claim the $10 million prize. Sign up in person at Circa Sports between now and September 7th and use promo code. Sign up from September 7th and use a proxy to play from anywhere, where we even have a deal with footballcontestproxy.com. Matt and Tony are absolutely fantastic. Make sure you use that promo code SGP. You can save $50 off of their proxy services. They're absolutely the best in the game. And if you don't have a trip booked for Las Vegas yet before football, Ultimate Contest Weekend is a great time to go out and hang out with Ryan and Sean and enjoy some of the open bar events at the greatest sportsbook in the world from August 22nd to August 24th. I'm going to try to get out there for those dates, Chris, August 22nd to the 24th. Man, I haven't been out to Vegas in a hot minute, man. I need to get out there, sign up for those Circa contests, and hopefully, get into the prize money there. But again, I'm for sure going to be using footballcontestproxy.com. Matt and Tony are absolutely fantastic.
Nice.
All right, Chris, so let's get into the awards here. So, we talked about that bunch that the quarterbacks are bunched up there. Allen, Burrow, Lamar, Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Anthony Richardson. So we have 2 guys here, 3 guys. I'll go 3 at a time here. So we got AJ Brown 40 to 1, Kyren Williams 35 to 1, and Puka Nacua 30 to 1. So for me here, Chris, I'll lead it off. I hate seeing when 2 guys on the same team are this close in odds, and we saw Puka Nacua did last year for this. I was going to say St. Louis Rams team, but this LA Rams team. I'm not saying it's going to be difficult for him to repeat what he did last year. And again, he's certainly capable of doing it because we saw it last year. But again, with Matthew Stafford there, and he was relatively healthy last year for this team, it makes me just a little bit nervous that is he going to be able to get Puka Nacua the football now? And also, let's not forget, Cooper Kupp is still there. I know he dealt with injury there as well, but I think he's also definitely a player that can rack up the yards and the reception. So I went ahead and crossed off Puka Nacua and Kyren Williams off the list. AJ Brown I also wasn't that excited for because, again, you have Devontae Smith and they also signed Saquon Barkley, who has even shorter odds to win this award. So I definitely do think that AJ Brown can have a big year, but since we talked about what, CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill did last year as far as wide receivers, I just don't see AJ Brown being at that caliber or putting up those stats for the Philadelphia Eagles here. So I wasn't interested in any of these 3 guys here, Chris.
Yeah, right. Same sheet of music right here with you. If you mentioned the 2 players on the same team, that's not something that I'm used to. Wanting to bet, and it doesn't matter like what market we're looking at or what team, what sport we're looking at. It's the same thing in basketball, right? Like you don't want those guys. This reminds me a little bit of DeJounte Murray and Trae Young when we're talking about the NBA with Kyron Williams and Puka. And I love Puka. We watched him have their breakout season last year, but as you mentioned, that was with a healthy Stafford. We don't know if he's going to be able to stay healthy. He played 15 games last year. And then also what we do know is Cooper Kupp only played 12 games last year. So we do expect those numbers to increase. And for that reason, I think that's another reason why you scratch Kyron Williams off as well, because when I think about that Rams offense, it's pass heavy, man. They pass the ball a lot. So I couldn't quite get there. I think you could cross both of those guys off the list. And then you mentioned it. Same thing with the Eagles. This team has a bunch of skill positions now, bringing Saquon Barkley over from New York. That could, and we expect it to for the Eagles, especially if he can stay healthy. We expect them to run the ball a little bit more this year than they ran it last year. And to have more success, it could be more play action success. But I mean, how big of a season would AJ Brown have to have for us to go 40-1, and put money on him when they have so many skill positions? And Jalen Hurts also on the list, right? So I mean, it's him. It's a bunch of it's pretty much all of his skill players on this list. Coming down below about 60-1. So yeah, those enough for me to scratch those guys off the list as well. Same track of thought process with you as well.
And then we have three guys here that are at around 28-1. Garrett Wilson, Jonathan Taylor, and Jahmyr Gibbs. I can see Garrett Wilson here, Chris, having a big year for the New York Jets, obviously with Aaron Rodgers being back. I'm trying to pull up his numbers from last year. And I mean, we've seen what Aaron Rodgers was able to do with Devontae Adams throughout his career when they were together in Green Bay. And
95 for 1,000 last year,
and that was with who, right?
That was with who?
Zach Wilson. Who else was there for this? I mean, I could have been named the quarterbacks that were there for the New York Jets last year. But Garrett Wilson, like you mentioned, there 95 receptions last year, 1,000 yards. I mean, imagine what he's going to be able to do with Aaron Rodgers there back now for this team. 95 receptions, 1,042 receiving yards. Only had 3 touchdowns, but that number is definitely going to change with Aaron Rodgers back. So I would be intrigued here by Garrett Wilson for this New York Jets team, because he's definitely going to get the targets. He's going to get the yardage. That was one I kind of put a tick mark down next to. Jonathan Taylor, I know what the potential is for him, but also, as we talked about, that CMC model, right? Like, is he going to be that guy that can also catch footballs for you out of the backfield and score touchdowns? So I definitely think that he can score the rushing touchdowns. I mean, prior to last season, with the whole contract thing and the injuries that he had dealt with, he was absolutely stellar. Jahmyr Gibbs is interesting for me as well, but I think that's another team that has a lot of weapons, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown, we'll talk about here in a minute. Sam Laporta is there for this team as well, and I think they like to spread the ball around as well. I feel like they're going to be a little bit more pass heavy as well for the Detroit Lions with their offense there. So I was intrigued by Garrett Wilson here at 28-1 here, Chris.
Same thought process again. Stay off my notes, man. Mentioned it, man. Garrett Wilson. I just look at what he did last year. And it's a lot of potential there. I mean, 95 receptions. He almost had 100 receptions with, like you said, with Wilson throwing them the football. You get him in his third year. Of course, you expect continued progression, and with a skill set like Aaron Rodgers and how hungry we think he is to get back on the floor. We've seen Aaron Rodgers with his elite wide receivers, and I think that could just take a guy like Garrett Wilson up and over the top here. You bring over Mike Williams as well, which probably alleviates a little bit of that double team that you think you would be able to do. So yeah, if he has similar numbers, similar targets this year coming, I think he could have a breakthrough season here. Not that last year wasn't great already, but 35-1 is a bit intriguing, and I would dabble in that on Garrett Wilson here. It wouldn't be a big bet, but it would definitely be somebody that I was looking at as well.
Yeah,
And then
100%.
you mentioned Jonathan Taylor. Same train of thought here, Munaf. Like you said, the standards just set so high. We don't expect offense to be down this year coming. So CMC might have to do something even more spectacular than he did last season if he's going to even take home this award. So same thought process there. And then Jahmyr Gibbs is also an interesting one, because I was high on Jahmyr Gibbs last season. You mentioned the thing that kind of talked me off of him, but I do think that he could potentially take a step in the right direction. I don't know if it's enough for me to want to put my money down on, but what is he, 35-1? I think is the best odds you can get for Jahmyr Gibbs. You mentioned the reason why, and we'll talk about, like you said, we'll talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown here because his odds are the next shortest to Jahmyr Gibbs when we talk about average odds or best odds. But down the stretch, Jahmyr Gibbs played big for this team, So, of course, you don't hope for any kind of injury. And I think if you're betting on him, then that's what you're betting on, because you mentioned Sam Laporta being there as well. I just love what Gibbs was able to do with 1,200 rushing yards last year, 234 touches altogether, found the end zone 11 times last season. So I love the versatility, and he does seem like he could be that type of CMC type running back. Now, will it happen in his second year? I'm not quite sure, so I'll pass on him because of Amon-Ra St. Brown and, like you mentioned, Sam Laporta, and just the way that they kind of divvy the rock out over there in Detroit. And last year they were hunting. This year they will be a little bit more of the hunted, with the expectations being a little bit bigger for him. So I'll pass on Jahmyr Gibbs, but I do like if he was 50-1, maybe a little something, but 35-1 doesn't seem like enough based on all the different factors that we just talked about here.
Yeah, again, just the same thought process here. I think for that Lions team, these teams are starting to put depth together, right? And I think, I hate using this example, but I think the Texans, what they brought in, last year we saw what Nico Collins did, Tank Dell did, but then they bring in Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon there as well. So it kind of takes away from, Nico Collins possibly having a big year. I think that's kind of what's been the theme, especially this offseason. I mean, Saquon Barkley going to a Eagles team that already had a lot of weapons. Lions, also a team that, again, added Sam Laporta last year. Amon-Ra St. Brown's had come into his own as well. You added Jahmyr Gibbs to the backfield as well there as well. So it's difficult because it's not like the 49ers last year where they were very, very reliant on CMC when all the injuries that they did deal with. And, with Brock Purdy being there as a quarterback, and no disrespect to Brock Purdy, but it's just that the wide receivers there, Deebo Samuel, we know he's always in and out of the lineup there as well. And that team has just been riddled by injuries. I think that one consistent player last year for them was CMC. All right, Chris, before we continue going down the list here, let me tell everyone about our friends over at Rhythm. If you're betting on player props and you need to download Rhythm, Rhythm is a go-to sports betting tool that transforms complex data into actionable insights, empowering bettors with smarter, data-driven decisions. Unlike other platforms, Rhythm combines advanced predictive analytics with an intuitive user experience, making betting both easy and enjoyable. Rhythm's predictive models were born from the brains of MIT data scientists and quants with over 3 years of data that help you drive better AI-backed betting decisions. So claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. All right, Chris, let's get down the list here. The next three guys, as we kind of get into the favorites here, it'll be Saquon Barkley, 16-1, Bijan, 20-1, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, 22-1. Amon-Ra St. Brown, we just talked about with Jahmyr Gibbs. I think it's a similar story for him. I think he's going to be a great fantasy player, a target machine, a guy that can get you receptions. I just feel like the yardage is not going to be there for a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, especially when you have a guy that's not too far away from odds here at 28-1, around 35-1 is the best odds that you can get for Jahmyr Gibbs we talked about. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, 22-1, around the best number you can get for him. So I crossed him off my list. Bijan, I was intrigued by, because we know the potential of what he can do. And I think that he can be in that caliber of players and class of what CMC has been able to do. And I know a lot of us do watch college football, and what he was able to do in Texas, not only running the football, but also catching the football out of the backfield. And now you have Kirk Cousins as your quarterback, who I know likes to sling it down the field. But I think that the offense for the Falcons should be centered around Bijan Robinson, because, again, he's a guy that can run with the football. but he's gonna also, screen passes, whether it's, coming out of the backfield. I think Bijan Robinson was intriguing to me at 20-1. And then who's the name that I did mention here? Saquon crossed off the list. I'm wrong, say crossed off the list, but Bijan Robinson, I was interested here, Chris.
Yeah, so we will align with crossing Saquon off the list. I can't. We already talked about how difficult this market is, and we talk about all the weapons that that Hurts now has in Philly with adding Saquon, but the injury, the health, the injury, like the sustainability for Saquon, just has not been there. Not enough for me to want to put my money on something for a full season. Sometimes I can't bet on him for the week. So yeah, I cross Saquon off as well. Bijan is an interesting one, as you mentioned, because I kind of felt like because they were so limited offensively last year, boy, you talk about, it was certain Sundays, where it was, more interesting to watch the paint dry than to watch that Atlanta offense because it struggled so much. Honestly. So bringing in Kirk Cousins, I think definitely helps a lot. Bijan I kind of feel like lived up to the hype. I know we cashed on a couple of his props, throughout the season last year. He almost had 1,000 yards. And 4 touchdowns on just 214 rushes. I expect with Kirk Cousins to be there, the offense to pick up just a tad bit. And when I say pick up, I mean pick up in pace. It kind of felt like they were scared to go out there and call plays last year because they were trying to just run the clock down and play such a slow, methodical football game. And I do expect the Pacers to pick up just a tad bit, with all the weapons that they have. But again, same kind of deal, in my opinion, with Jahmyr Gibbs here. If you got a second-year running back who played really, really well, and that also is surrounded by other really shiny toys, right? We know that the Atlanta Falcons have a lot of skill positions. They're stacked at the wide receiver position, tight end, of course, with Pitts being there is going to be really, really good for them. So I kind of worry about him having that, I guess, breakout year. I guess I would kind of give him a slighter nod and agree with the odds being a little bit shorter for him than they are for somebody like Jahmyr Gibbs. But I do expect one of these guys to end up with one. When I'm talking about comparing Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs. So I guess Bijan should have a little shorter odds here, but not enough for me to want to bet on.
Yeah. Again, I think you make a great point as well, is that it's going to be interesting to see, obviously with a new head coach there as well, that will it take time for the offense to get implemented as well, right? And you have a new quarterback, new head coach there. So maybe a Bijan is a year away from being that guy, at least for this award right now. And again, going into the second year for Bijan Robinson, definitely someone I want to keep an eye on, because there was times last year where he just looked like an absolute bust, and that offense just kind of looked discombobulated. Like you mentioned, rather watch paint dry than that offense last year, led by Desmond Ridder. All right, so kind of get into the cream of the crop here, Chris. The top 6 guys: Justin Jefferson 15-1, Breece Hall 15-1, and Jamar Chase 12-1. So I know what Justin Jefferson is capable of doing, but now you have a quarterback in JJ McCarthy or Sam Darnold that's going to be the starting quarterback for you. And I feel like there might be a sense of frustration for Justin Jefferson this upcoming season. He got the big bucks paid this offseason. So I think that as much as I love Justin Jefferson and I've had him on my fantasy team, I just don't think that the numbers are going to be there for him this year as they have been in the past. And I typically don't like betting on guys that just got paid on their contract. Look, is he one of the best wide receivers in the league? Absolutely. You could also make the argument that some people may say he is the best in the league. But now with that quarterback change there as well, I think that makes me nervous about Justin Jefferson there. So I crossed him off my list. Breece Hall, Chris, I'm not sure if he's warranted to be at 15-1, especially with him coming off of the injury. And
I thought it was just me,
right. And also being obviously with the New York Jets, you have Aaron Rodgers back, and I don't know. I just, the number didn't excite me there. for Brees Hall. So I crossed him off my list. And then Jamar Chase, 12-1. I think this could be a breakout year for him. I think he's one of the guys that is definitely capable of putting the numbers up. Like we talked about guys like the Tyreek Hills of the world, the CeeDee Lambs of the world. I think Jamar Chase is definitely fully capable of doing that. I know last year they were missing Joe Burrow for much of the season. And I think this might be a year where they have an easy schedule. I think we talked about this when we talked about Joe Burrow, that because they finished last in the division last year, they're going to have a easier schedule this year. Last season, 100 receptions, little over 1,200 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. But now you get Joe Burrow back. I think that he can definitely be in that conversation, but I needed to see him do it before I can bet on him at 12-1. So at least this block here really didn't excite me here, Chris.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned with the quarterback play for Justin Jefferson takes him off the list. I'm also in that same criteria with you. You know, I'm not betting on a guy that just got paid that gets a downgrade at the quarterback position. Yeah, I'll pass on Justin Jefferson, even though, like you said, he is absolutely amazing. But I mean, yeah, he's just gonna need a lot from whichever one of those quarterbacks ends up, you know, being in that starting position. Again, you know, if some alignment with you with Jamar Chase. I think if I'm betting on Jamar Chase, like you said, he can have that breakout year. We know what he was able to do. We know what he's able to do anyway, not just last year, the last few years. If I'm betting on Jamar Chase, the one thing you mentioned him, you know, that I really need to happen is I need quarterback to be healthy, right? We need I definitely need you know, a healthy quarterback throughout the full season, because he hasn't been able to get that consistently with Joe Burrow, you know, having some injuries and some knick-knack injuries that'll keep him out 3-4 weeks, you know, or even more throughout the season. But yeah, I kind of feel like the Bengals are in a buy on spot, and I think it is because of the potential that, you know, somebody like Jamar Chase has. So I couldn't talk you off, you know, potentially going with Jamar Chase here. I think he is in a relatively good situation. Of course, they lose Mixon, right, as well, right? You know, didn't Mixon leave?
Yep.
So
I mean, Texans.
Yeah, he's with your Texans. So yeah, that you know, it's probably just more passes in general. So yeah, I couldn't talk anybody off wanting to sprinkle on Jamar Chase here. I see 12-1 as best odds for Jamar Chase.
And then we get to the top here, Chris. We talked about the 3 guys: CeeDee Lamb, Christian McCaffrey, and Tyreek Hill, who is the odds-on favorite right now. You take a look at the best number you can get for Tyreek Hill, 8-1 currently over on FanDuel, 9-1 over for Christian McCaffrey to repeat, and then CeeDee Lamb 10-1. You could get the best number there at Bet River. So I crossed off Christian McCaffrey, Chris, here, and I think it is going to be a little bit difficult for him to repeat what he did last year. Do I think he can do it again? Absolutely, he can do it again. But it's also you're concerned about the injury factor with Christian McCaffrey, right? I mean, last year he was absolutely phenomenal for this team, played in 16 of the 17 games. Like you mentioned, little over 1,400 rushing yards, had a little over 500 receiving yards, accounted for 21, 22 touchdowns. And had over, like we mentioned, over 2,000 scrimmage yards for this San Francisco 49ers team. But again, for him to go back to back, yeah, it's possible, but that just doesn't excite me for Christian McCaffrey for this upcoming year. I think I really do like CeeDee Lamb, because I feel like CeeDee Lamb is the type of player that can repeat what he did last year. And this running game for the Cowboys, Chris, I think it's going to be non-existent. They lost Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard was supposed to be this guy for the Cowboys when they let Ezekiel Elliott go, and it just didn't work out for them last year. They were a very, very pass-heavy offense. They brought Ezekiel Elliott back to this team, and I'm not sure that that's really going to warrant for this team to have a lot of success on the ground. I just kind of feel like they'll be a pass-heavy team. So CeeDee Lamb, I think at 10-1, getting 10-1, I think it's a really good number for him. Tyreek Hill, I want to get your thoughts first, because again, at around 8-1 as him being the odds-on favorite, I understand it. But I think as far as this 3 group of guys goes, I think CeeDee Lamb was the one that excited me the most here, Chris.
They both kind of excite me here, enough. Like you said, Christian
Okay.
McCaffrey, injury prone. I wouldn't think that he would be able to repeat that, even though, like you said, it's definitely possible. Strength of schedule isn't even that bad for San Francisco either. I was looking it up while you were talking. They're like middle of the pack, like 16th. And to your point about, I think we were discussing Bijan, just going back just a tad bit. Atlanta does have the easiest schedule. I know we talked about that when we talked about Kirk Cousins in long MVP odds earlier, on one of the previous pods. So going back to where we are here now, CD is going, in my opinion, as you mentioned, is going to have another really, really big year. So, if you just go back and look at those numbers, I mean, if we expect this offensive line to continue to hold up so that Dak can get the ball down the field and, put the ball in CD's hands so he can make plays, I can't, really look away from that. When we already talked about it at the top of the show, when we're looking at this award, we're looking at wide receivers, big explosive wide receivers that are reliable, dependable guys that can catch the football, make plays for themselves. They have to be big impact players, and that's what we saw last year from CD Lamb. He wowed me last year, so I wouldn't be betting against CD at 10-1. And then you mentioned Tyreek. Tyreek is scary. I know defenses are trying to fine tune and shade to his side, but I mean it's just one step and he's by you and boom, he's gone, right? And he had a goal of getting 2,000 yards last season, and of course he didn't quite get there. But what he was able to do was absolutely unbelievable last year. And I would just we talked about skinny Tua. This guy should be able to utilize his feet to buy a little bit more time in the pocket this season. That really scares me off. Now, do I want to play the favorite? Most of the time, absolutely not. But, just thinking about how they came up short last season. And, Tyreek, I don't think is, out of his prime yet. I think he's still going to be as fast. I think he's going to be the cheetah that we know him to be. So it wouldn't surprise me if he was able to get to 1,900 yards or, 2,000 yards. And I do think putting him at 2,000 yards, if he probably automatically wins this award as long as there is some success with the Miami Dolphins down south. So yeah, I couldn't talk anyone off. Like you said, CeeDee Lamb he really jumps out to me, probably just as much as Jamar Chase. Hear me enough. And Tyreek Hill, I kind of like Tyreek, even though he is the all-out favorite. I wouldn't be betting on Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, obviously these two guys at the top of the list, Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb, definitely. I mean, we know what they're capable of. Their stats have really been interesting not interesting, I should say, but just jump off the page when you're looking at wide receivers. It's the top of the top. And those two guys definitely are going to be filling up the stat sheet again, I think, this upcoming season for their respective teams here. Chris, let's kind of recap here before we wrap it up here. If you want to throw out 2 to 3 guys or whatever you want to give out as far as, guys that you will be splitting up, maybe a unit on or guys that you are comfortable with giving out to our listeners that, hey, I know that money's going to be wrapped up for about 6-7 months possibly, or will be before we find out who the winner is going to be. But who are you going to be on for Offensive Player of the Year for this upcoming season?
Yeah, let's go. We'll start 35-1 with Garrett Wilson. Like you mentioned, we of course we need a healthy Aaron Rodgers for the longevity of the season. But I mean, I can just imagine, this dude's probably fiending to be able to play with Aaron Rodgers. And they got 3 snaps together last year on Monday Night Football in the first game of the season before that was done with. So I think Garrett Wilson will be big, strong, physical receiver, 3rd year. Still was able to get nearly 100 catches and almost 1,050 receiving yards last season. I think he has a really, really good chance this year at 35-1. And outside of Garrett Wilson, as we come down the list, maybe a little bit of a sprinkle on Bijan, just because he is in, like we talked about it, the easiest schedule. I think he has a much more capable quarterback that opens up that offense, because Bijan was getting 5 yards to carry on some days, even when it was 11 men in the box, because they knew they were passing running the football because Desmond Ridder was at quarterback. So I like that addition, and I think being in a new offensive system, while you mentioned could take a while for this team to kind of get it going, I think Bijan will have a breakout, even more of a breakout year than he did last year. So I would split Garrett Wilson, Bijan, and then it has to be a little bit on Jamar Chase and CD in my opinion as well. Like I said, I probably leave Tyreek out just because he is the all-out favorite, but maybe a little bit on Tyreek as well. But yeah, I would split CD and Jamar Chase as well. So I guess I'll go those top four. CD at 10-1, Jamar Chase at 12-1, not Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan at 20-1. Yeah. And then I would also be looking at Garrett Wilson at 35-1 as well. Those are my top four. I think I would go with. What about yourself? Talk to me.
100% agree with you about CeeDee Lamb. I hate that he's a Cowboy, but
me too.
Here we are. 10-1
in my division. I absolutely hate him.
He's a guy that if you're in that NFC East division, just absolutely torches you. But a conversation maybe for later, but I feel like maybe the days are numbered for CeeDee Lamb if the Cowboys don't find any success this upcoming season. But as far as the pod goes here for this upcoming season, 10-1 for CeeDee Lamb over at Bet Rivers. Definitely love that. Talked about Bijan Robinson. I think this has to be the year for him, right? And I know you have Kirk Cousins now. You're definitely upgrading at quarterback. Drake London, obviously there. Kyle Pitts there as well. So I think Bijan is a guy that, is starting to trend in the direction of what CMC is as far as the type of player, meaning catching
dual threat. Yeah.
Dual threat. That's 100% correct word. Dual threat for Bijan Robinson. So I'm excited to see what he does for the Atlanta Falcons this upcoming season. I agree about Garrett Wilson as well. I think that for him, it's going to be a breakout year, barring injury, of course, and that's applicable for every single player that we talk about in these awards markets. But it's a simple fact that you have a future Hall of Famer, former MVP in Aaron Rodgers, and we know that when it comes down to it for Aaron Rodgers, that he only trusts a select few players, and I think we saw that in Green Bay, and I think that Garrett Wilson can really be that guy for the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers. Outside of that, Chris, I think those were I think we're in agreement here about most of these guys here. Devontae Adams at 80-1 is always interesting, but again, the quarterback situation there doesn't really excite me for him. I think that's pretty much it, man. I know that it's a big it's an interesting big market. It's an interesting field to talk about, like we just did. But I think some of the numbers, like for these guys, we talked about like Justin Jefferson 15-1. Can understand why it is 15-1 because of the quarterback situation. Breece Hall 22-1. That is a good number when you definitely do shop around for it. But again, if we like Garrett Wilson, we're not going to like Breece Hall here for the New York Jets. But yeah, it's definitely a fun award to definitely talk about. It's more, Chris, a stat padding award, quote unquote, I would say.
Absolutely.
For this awards market. But yeah, that's it, man. I think this was a lot of fun to go through. Offensive Player of the Year for the upcoming NFL season. Anything else you want to mention, Chris, before we go our separate ways?
Not like you mentioned, this was fun. But when you're going through a market like this, you got to figure out your reasons for why, right? Like why can't this? What will hinder this person from being, the top stat leader? Because even when we saw, outside of Christian McCaffrey winning it last year, him putting up, astronomical numbers both through the air and receiving through the air and, getting those rushing yards on the ground and all the touchdowns as well. Remember that streak of touchdowns that he had,
Yeah.
It was a lot for CMC, but even the year before when Justin Jefferson won it, like that was a big year for him and Kirk Cousins as well. And the year before that, it was Cooper Kupp who put up astronomical numbers. So when you're betting on this award, you kind of need that standalone. And with Cooper Kupp, even 3 years ago, that was before, of course, Puka Nacua became on the scenes. And just going back to Derrick Henry, remember what Derrick Henry was able to do when he won this award? Like, you have to really be a standout. So if you can start to, for people who will listen to this and go back to it, you got to really think about, this player, getting all of the touches or being very selfish and the offense kind of being, predicated around this person. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that, as we kind of wrap up, because like you said, there are a lot of people on the list, but we had to go through and X them out because even though we like them and we like, we think that they're going to have positive impacts, how much of a positive impact will they be, 99 percentile in their offense that they're working through? Because that's what you need to be in order to be considered for this award.
100% agree, man. Again, a lot of fun to go through this award. We have about 3 award markets left, I believe, which will be Defensive Player of the Year, then Offensive Rookie of the Year for obviously offense and Rookie of the Year for offense and defense left before, like I mentioned, we get into the division previews and our season-long player props. So 100% excited to get through it before we know it. NFL season is going to be here as we slowly approach the Hall of Fame game, also college football right around the corner as well. All right, that is going to wrap it up for this edition of the Propcast. Make sure you guys follow Chris on X. That's at ChrisBeCappin with 2 P's and 2 N's. You can follow me there as well at SportsNerd824. And make sure if you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel for the Propcast, go ahead and do so. Just put in Propcast SGPN. You'll see us there. Do us a favor, subscribe, and we'll be here all season long for the NFL season, of course, the NBA as well. All right, we'll talk to you guys later. Till then, good luck with your bets. Let's break these books off and let it ride.